All right, so I'm going to drop a Google link. I dropped it earlier. Here it is again. So in this Google Drive, there is a copy to the 2018, the current RPA package that we're using that is good up until December 20th is what California Association of Realtors is saying. They're going to release the new RPA. We're being told in November. They're going to run it side by side with the 2018 one. And then December 20th, hard stop, new RPA only, right? So yeah, everybody get some cameras. This is kind of interactive. This is a really boring, it's a really boring subject, right? Contract. It's super boring, but super important if you're a real estate agent, right? What do you need to do? You need to know the contract. Whatever RPA we're using, that's the one you need to know. So I do have a quick question for you guys. Can unmute, you can put yourselves in the chat. How many of you have closed a transaction in 2021? You can either raise a hand, put it in the chat, unmute yourself. Carol says no.
That's a couple.
Kayoko says yes. Nancy says maybe. Was that a maybe, Nancy?
Because I'm an assistant right now and transferring over to transaction coordinator, but I'm not an agent yet. So I haven't personally closed, but I've helped other agents close.
Okay, perfect. So you kind of have a working knowledge of the current contract.
Yes.
Okay, so second question, this is, I'm going to need all your participation. We're in October right now. I'm just reminding everybody, we're in October. This new contract drops in December. Would you like a class on the brand new contract that's dropping in December, or would you like an overview of the current contract that we're using? They're honestly really similar in content, completely different in format. It's new. I've got it. Taylor's telling me new. Just new. All right. So what I hear is we're doing the new one. New. Nobody cares about the old one anymore. Okay, get rid of that. So I'm going to get out of zip forms because the new contract doesn't live in zip forms yet, but you guys will be able to see a copy. If you go to that Google Drive, there's a highlighted copy. Every time I try to attach something from my computer, it never wants to go, but I'm going to try it here anyways and drop it in here. Ooh, it's working. All right. I also just dropped a copy of the 2021 highlighted version in the chat so you all can grab it. But what I'm also going to do is I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully I share the right screen. All right, you guys are going to see yourselves for a minute. Don't be worried. We'll get rid of that. Okay, can everybody see my screen? Can I get some yeses in the chat? Amy's going to pay attention. Sweet, thank you so much, Amy. All right. So one of the things you might notice, to those of you that have worked in contracts and seen the old one, there's no purchase price. We don't see a purchase price here, right? So we're not seeing a purchase price. We're not seeing a close of escrow. You're not seeing that in section 1 and 2. So I'm going to go over, just before we kind of dive into this, I'm going to go over just some of the bigger changes that have happened in this form. And I'm going to move you guys over to the side because there we go. So I may not be looking at you because I have 2 screens. The new RPA is now 16 pages, right? So we've gone from 12 pages to 16. This is 16 pages without the rest of the junk that we attach, right? So this is 16 pages without the agency disclosure, without the wire fraud advisory, without fair housing, without possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, like without the BIA, right? Buyer inspection advisory, without the CCPA, without the consumer protection, whatever that thing's called. 16 pages, just the RPA. But the great thing is all of the contract points are now in the first 3 pages, right? So no more are there hidden check boxes throughout the contract that you've got to find and see if somebody snuck in, you know, a little checkbox here, a little checkbox there that you may have missed, right? So now it's all in a grid. It's all right there. It's all in the first 3 pages, and they put all the negotiable terms in what we're going to call the grid. You're going to hear the grid a lot. The grid is our friend. So that's kind of an overview. The reason it's 16 pages, it's not that they added a bunch of new stuff other than the grid, is that they added formatting. It's easier to read. They've added longer signature lines in the back of the RPA. So now we can have entities signature block. So get rid of a form, right? If it's done correctly, we don't need the representative signing capacity disclosure. And then the real estate certification now is all its own page, and it's really exciting. So if you can hang with me till the end, because this, again, I told you it's like chunky, boring stuff. But if you can hang with me till the end, the certification page is really cool. I think it's going to save a lot of heartache, right? So we're really happy to see that in there. All right, and going through the grid, when you see it, just really quick, there is no I, there is no O, there's no section I, no section O, and the reason is because I looks like 1 and O looks like 0. So to avoid any confusion, you'll see that there's nothing there. All right, first off, date prepared, you guys. Date prepared, super important. Always put the date that you wrote the contract. This doesn't have to be the date that your buyer signed it, but it is the date that you wrote the contract. And the reason that this date is important is because this is the date all of their addendums reference. So if we do an addendum to the contract, we're always referencing the date prepared, because the date accepted can change, right? If you have a counteroffer, the date your client signed could change. If you send a DocuSign at night, maybe one buyer signs it, the other buyer doesn't sign until the next day. So this date is important. Put it in there, as it's the date all of their addendums reference. You guys, any questions you have, throw in the chat. I know Amy's going to keep an eye on that. Assessors parcel numbers. This is great for you, that those of you that like to write contracts, maybe there's an additional parcel or it's vacant land. We now have a longer line for multiple APMs. You're going to see section C is new. This is just telling them that the terms are specified down below. You'd be surprised, it has to be bolded to tell people. Let's see, confirmation of agency. So here you have to be, right? To be or not to be. Please, please, please let dre.ca.gov be your friend when you're writing these offers. So when you're in the MLS and you're looking at the listing agent's license number, you'll only see their actual license number, not their brokerage's license number. If you go to www.ca.dre.gov, you can put in anybody's license number and pull up their license number, the brokerage license number, all the license numbers. This is probably the biggest missed portion of the contract that your transaction coordinators are having to fix for you with the form agency confirmation. And while we love paperwork, we hate to just make up forms for you. So make sure you're putting all the licensing numbers, because if this isn't filled out correctly, then we have to do that. All right, there's a little new thing right here. Section C, I didn't really light it up because I don't know that you guys really use, if you do co-broker listings, so say you guys co-broker with somebody at Compass or somebody at Pacific Sotheby's, you would mark this box, but I'm not seeing a ton of that. There is the website to look up licensing numbers. Go under consumers and license lookup, and you can look up anybody's DRE number. You can see if they have things wrong, if they were ever had disciplinary actions. You can see all kinds of fun stuff there. It is a consumer site, so feel free. All right, now we're getting into the grid. This tells everybody this form is 16 pages, right? We're going to go in section 3. So you're going to see the big changes. Most of all the numbers have changed. What you were used to referencing in the prior purchase agreement, now just the sections have changed, but the content is pretty much the same. So this is telling the clients, right, that here's all the contractual forms, that it is 16 pages, and everybody is to read all 16 pages. All negotiable terms are in the grid. So anything that can be changed, added, moved, they're here, right? 2 things that have changed in this contract that you can no longer change the dates are: notice to perform, 2 days. You can no longer change those days. I don't know if y'all have been tricked into seeing this. People mark like notice to perform is 1 day, or they want to change that notice to perform is 2 days, can no longer change it. The other is the demand to close escrow. It's still 3 days. It's no longer a checkbox to change that either. So you're only going to see negotiable items here in the next 3 pages. All right. The great thing about the grid is you're going to see you have 3A purchase price, right? So you're going to write in your purchase price. If you check this box, all cash, it's all cash, right? Here, you'll see a paragraph number. So you get 3A, B, C, D, right, on down the line. And then you're going to see these corresponding paragraph numbers. These are the paragraphs in the body of the RPA that give you more information in this section, right? So CAR has told us, I don't know if this is true yet, right? Things are bound to change, but they've told us that either there will be, when you're in zip forms and you're filling this out, there will either be like a hover pop-up box that will read, have a copy of that section, or you'll be able to click on that paragraph and it'll take you to the section so you can read more. We're going to kind of go through the grid as it is, and then we'll dive deeper into some of the paragraph numbers. So here's your purchase price, all cash. Close of escrow, you're going to see that now the close of escrow defaults to days, right? So most of you are writing what, 21, 30 days. I've seen 12 days, 15 days, 10 days, you name it, all kinds of days. You're going to write your day. If your buyer needs to close on a certain date, of course, you have the option to put in the date. 3C, expiration of offer. Now it is specifying that it's 3 calendar days after all buyer signatures, right? So that's a new point of clarification that they've added into the contract. D1, D2, this gets confusing. This is causing a lot of confusion among people, and I want to try to break it down for you. Okay, so initial deposit. Most of you guys write, I'm assuming if you write an offer, you're going to say, hey, Mr. Buyer, how much money do you want to put down? They're going to say none. No, they're going to say like, they have $5,000, $10,000, whatever you can, had a conversation with the lender and they're going to let you know. So say they're going to put $10,000 down. Depending on your purchase price, this percentage will automatically calculate. So it's not that you're have to put in a percentage price. You're going to put in the number, the percentage price will automatically calculate. And it is literally just for calculation purposes of being transparent. It is not, it is not like so that you have to change it. You have to say 1% or 2% or 3%. You can say my buyer's giving $10,000. Maybe that's 1.8523%, right? I don't know. So, and it's just going to show that calculation. Also, it's literally just for calculation purposes, and it's not a contractual term. So if you get countered, you're not beholden to keep it at that 2%, 3%, 1.8275%. It's still going to stay that $10,000 unless in the counter offer it states the buyer's going to pay a percentage, right? So it's literally just for calculation purposes. So don't get tripped up on that. Just put your number in as you normally would. Realize that if the purchase price goes up, that doesn't change your buyer's deposit. It only changes your buyer's deposit is if the terms of the counter state buyer to pay blah blah percent, right, as a deposit. So just know that it's confusing. Let's see what else we got. E for delivery. Okay, E1. This is also tripping up people. So we're going to talk about contingencies down in section L. Right now, we're really talking about loan amount, right? So purchase, close of escrow, expiration, deposit. Now we're talking about loan amount. You're going to see that you can, again, you put how much their loan is. Say it's $500,000. They're going to automatically calculate that percentage of the purchase price. It's just for clarification. Then over here, it defaults to conventional. Then if you have an FA or a VA, it will, when you click those forms and zip forms, it'll pull that FVAC form that you need. It will pull the home inspection disclosure if you need it. Put in your points. Just so you guys know, you really should fill this out. If your buyer ever needs to cancel on loan terms, it's really helpful to have terms that you can cancel on. Like if it ever gets big, right? So you want to make sure you're putting in that term. So otherwise, your client could be, if you didn't put in a term, well, if they qualify for an 8% loan, you might be stuck if somebody wanted to fight you on it. So it's always a good idea to at least put in your terms. Now, the 17 days, that is only if you have a VA or an FHA buyer and the lender calls out lender required repairs. Within 17 days, you need to provide a list of those lender required repairs. That is all that 17 days is there. There used to be a form for those of you, I don't know if you, sometimes I talk too much, but there used to be a form for VA repairs. That's going away. It's all going to be on the request for repairs. It needs to be delivered in 17 days to the seller if it's lender required repairs. So we'll move along. Amount financed. Primary occupancy type is now primary, right? So it defaults now to, I think it's always defaulted, but it's a little more clear, primary. And you can now see if it's secondary or an investment property, the balance of the down payment, and the purchase price. So when you guys put the purchase price in here and you put in your initial deposit here, it kind of automatically calculates everything for you. And then it's going to give you that total purchase price, as is every good RPA. Buyers and sellers signatures are on the bottom. Again, property address is now on every page, still up here. So that's great. They've added this. This is new G1. G1 is, if they're, I don't know, are you guys seeing, are we seeing any credits from the seller to the buyer in the contracts right now? I'm not seeing them, but maybe someday. If there is, you can put that in here. Like, so say if you have a VA buyer and they want that 3% seller credit, you can put in a number or percentage price, again, just for calculation. And it automatically says that those are to be applied to closing costs, right? Credits are always applied to closing costs. The other new thing, H1 and H2, these and H3, these all have defaulted now to as attached to the offer, right? Before, the default was provided within 3 days. Now it's attached with the offer. I have a request to make when you guys are writing your offers and you send that offer package to the listing side. When you do open escrow, just remember to send over those verification of funds and loan applications to your transaction coordinator. We do need that for your broker file. And now you can say, what kind of loan application is it, right? A pre-qualification or fully underwritten. All right, what else we got going on? Oh, my favorite, assignment requests. All right, you guys, please do me a favor. Talk to your buyers. Ask them if they're married. If they're married and their spouse wants to be on title, just put them on the dang contract in the beginning. What this is saying is we're getting a lot of assignment requests, like day of closing, 2 days before closing. This is saying now that any assignment requests have to be done 17 days, right? Or blank days if you change it, but 17 days. If your buyer wants to buy in a trust, if your buyer wants to add a spouse, a brother, an uncle, if an entity, say you have an investor buyer and they're buying it under 123 Scooby-Doo LLC and they want to change it to property address LLC, that has to be done within 17 days, right? So just remember, assignment request, 17 days. That's new. We love that. All right, now we're getting into the meaty meat bones of contingencies, right? Section L in your grid. Here are basically all of your contingencies, all spelled out, L1 through 8. So one of the things that they've changed a little bit, right, is they've defaulted them all to 17 days, right? No more loan 21 days. They did that, what, in 2018, they changed it to 21 days. Now we're going back to everything is 17 days, right? Or 5 days from receipt. And what that means is if the seller, let's use some real world things here. I don't know if y'all closed anything with HOAs, right? So homeowners associations, just a third party. We have no control over when those HOA docs come in. But let's say they don't get them until day 15 and it's a 17-day removal. The buyer still has 5 days to review, right? So that's either within that 17 days or 5 days from receipt. So if they come in later, they still get that 5 days from receipt, whichever is later. So just remember that as you move forward. For you listing agents out there, that means your AVID, which is attached to your TDS, has to be delivered. Otherwise, it gives the buyer 5 more days to review and keep that contingency. Let's see. The only contingencies you can remove in the contract are loan an appraisal. Everything else requires a contingency removal. And you're going to see that they wrote that in the box here, right? And if you are removing more contingencies than just loan and appraisal, you need to have the CR attached. Now, my understanding is when you click that box, if you click that box, like say you're removing all the disclosures or something, or a physical investigation, you're like, you know what, no investigation, no appraisal, all we're going to worry about is loan. You're going to have to attach that CR and bring that in. Also note that while a lot of people remove that appraisal contingency, with a VA or an FHA, removal of the appraisal contingency doesn't remove the buyer's right to cancel if it appraises low. Doesn't mean they have to, right? You could have a VA or an FHA buyer that's like, I don't care, I have money, I'm going to pay the $30,000 over the appraised price. But what this is saying is that that law that is in effect, or that rule, it's not, you can't waive it, right? You just can't write no appraisal contingency, and then if the buyer wants to back out. So listing agents, pay attention. I'm seeing a lot of VA, FHA come across with that box checks, and I know that they know that it's not really accurate, right? But what it can mean is that the buyer's serious and going to bring in the funds. So then you want to check, make sure they have enough money to cover the gap, if that makes sense to you guys. All right, let's see, what else are we talking about? Investigation and access to the property. So here you go, guys. The access to the property is not a contingency, and it doesn't create additional contingency rights. So what this means is, say your buyer removes investigation of property with the offer, but they want access. They're going to go and they're going to measure, they're going to see what kind of tile they want, they're going to go make their quotes at Home Depot, whatever it is. What they can't turn around and do is be like, oh, well, we went in and saw it and now we don't want it because of the condition. That's not what access is for. It's just for informational access. Does that make sense? The rest is pretty self-explanatory. They are revising the contingency removal, so it will match all of these items in the contract. So you'll see that there's 79 revised forms coming out in December. Yay. I know you guys are excited. Exactly. All right. So we've got a lease and lien item. Let's talk about that for just a minute. They have 17 days to review, right? So buyers have 17 days to agree to take on leased or liened items. This includes solar. This includes, for those working out in the country, propane tanks, right? Any PACE or HERO loans or anything they're going to take over. You have L8. If you check this box right here, that COP form will bring it right in, right? So you'll just add another page. Moving right along. M1, 2, and 3. This is time of possession, right? And tenant occupation. So time of possession, they've now defaulted it back again, for those of you that have been in the business for a while, to upon notice of recordation. So what that means is if everybody got their acts together and the loan funded and they send it off in the morning, it can record as early as 9 a.m. So make sure that buyer's agents, you can either leave it at recordation, which could also mean 9 o'clock at night, right? Like 8 o'clock at night, depending on how late the county recorder's office is open. Or you can check 6 p.m. or any other time and pick, AM or PM. There's also a tenant in possession form, which the TOPA, that's going to be one of the new forms. There's 9 new forms coming out. That's one of the new ones. So any tenants now, regardless if they are staying in possession past closing, you're going to need that form. Seller occupied or vacant units, you've got the SIP. Everybody knows 29 days or less, we need to have a seller in possession. 30 days or more, we're going to need a residential lease after sale. So that's just going to bring those forms right in. All tenant occupied units now need that TOPA form. All right, now we're going to talk about times for performance. So documents, fees, compliance. These are really more of your seller timeframes, but it does apply to both parties. So here you've got your seller delivery of documents, right? So sellers to bring their disclosures within 7 days after acceptance, or shorten that. So buyer's agents, here's a hot tip. Make your dates make sense, right? So if you are saying that your buyer is going to remove all of their physical inspection and investigation contingencies in 7 days, think about shortening this up, right? You don't want to get disclosures on the same day your client has to remove contingencies, right? Give them a day or two to review. So they don't get 5 extra days if it's delivered within this time frame, right? So make it short, right? If you're going to remove your client's stuff in 5 days or in 7 days, make seller to deliver in 3 days or 2 days or whatever. Listing agents, if you do that, please let me get your disclosures ready now so that we're not holding up and giving them more time. I think this will change eventually. This says that buyers and sellers need to return all escrow holder general provisions and supplemental instructions within 5 days of receipt. We'll see how that works out. Time to pay for fees for ordering HOA docs. The seller needs to pay within 3 days. That's standard. We now have a new section here at N4, which will be referenced in 10B1, which is the installation of smoke detectors, CO detectors, and water heater bracing. So here, you have 7 days after acceptance. So what this is that sellers need to have all this stuff ready to go within 7 days. And you're going to see when we go look at 10B1 that there's consequences if they don't take care of this. If it causes a reinspection for an appraisal and there's a fee for that, the seller's now liable for that fee. So listing agents, drop off those smoke detectors and make sure those water heaters are braced within that 7-day period. Again, we have initials. We're on to page 4. I don't see any questions, so I'm just assuming you guys are either not listening or I'm just so awesome you don't have any questions. All right, items included and excluded. The newest thing here is that they have pre-marked for you bathroom mirrors, regardless of how they are attached. And the reason is because, as you all know, we like to buy bathroom mirrors, right? We like to go to Home Goods. We like to buy big old fancy mirrors and we take down that ugly just piece of glass, you know, our mirror that they stick up there, and we put our pretty fancy mirrors up there. Those have to stay down. No more taking those down. Doesn't matter how they're attached. If it's a bathroom mirror, it stays in the bathroom. People were taking those. The other thing to note here is if any of the boxes are checked, they stay. So make sure if they want that video doorbell, you mark that video doorbell. If they want the smart home control devices, mark the smart home control devices. Here's your stove, fridge, wine refrigerators, I think is new. Electric car charging stations. I mean, these are some like kind of can be pricey items. So if your client sees them in the home and wants them in the home, make sure you check them in the home. Same goes for if there's any items you don't want in the home, make sure you exclude them here. If the listing has say a standalone jacuzzi and your client is like, I don't want that standalone jacuzzi. I don't want that playground out in the backyard. I don't want the dog run that they built, like whatever it is, make sure that it's excluded. Otherwise it's staying. Listing agents, make sure you review this because anything that is not written down here as excluded stays. That includes staged furniture. So, or staged items. So if there's items in there that maybe belong to a stager, like a refrigerator or whatever, you want to make sure that those items get excluded either here or on a counteroffer. Does that make sense? Here's, now we're going to go into costs, right? So here, I love this. This makes it super easy. I feel like the last RPA was really kind of convoluted and there were things on one page and on another page and kind of was just, I don't know, all over the place. This is making it really simple, right? So you're reading it like a book from left to right. You're just reading it. Natural hazard zone, buyer, seller, both, environmental, other provided by. Okay, you guys, we always know that the seller pays for the NHD report. Now you can say who you want it provided by. Here's your additional reports. So if you're going to be asking for termite reports or any other kind of reports, go ahead and write them in here, specify who's to pay. Here's for smoke alarm, CO detectors, and water heater bracing. You see the seller had 7 days. Well, here you can say who's going to pay for it, right? So buyer, seller, or both. Probably that's going to default to a seller thing. We have government required point of sale inspections and reports. So you guys know about the fire hardening and defensible space. There's a lot of confusion on whether or not that's point of sale. I'm not going to get into that, but this is where that would fall under, right? Is that point of sale inspections reports and also corrective and remedial actions. I think right now the remedial actions are falling to the buyer, but this just be aware that this is here. I'm sure more information is going to come out on the fire hardening as we go forward. I could do a whole class just on that. Q7, escrow. Taylor, there, well, so that's not exactly true. I'm seeing fire inspections from CAL FIRE. Escondido says it's a point of sale. It's really like city by city versus county. The city of San Diego does have an inspector that'll do it. CAL FIRE has inspectors that'll do it. It's just, I think the bigger issue is whether or not it's a point of sale requirement, and people are having arguments about that. And the way it's all interpretation of the law. I am not a lawyer. I refuse to interpret it. So we'll just go with whatever our in-house counsel tells us, which is right now that it is not a point of sale requirement. So there you go. Owner or escrow fees. Here, you guys, you don't have to write each to pay their own anymore. There's a checkbox. Click. And why might you want to check that box? You might want to check that box because maybe your fees are lower, right? If you hit both, then they'll be split 50-50. So you probably want to put each to pay their own fees. Here we got title, owner's title insurance policy. Seller typically pays for that. I love this Q9 right here. Buyer's lender title insurance policy is paid for by the buyer. I think escrow is going to love that too. Buyer's always like, why am I paying for it? It said on there that the seller's paying for it. Well, the buyer's always been responsible for the lender's title policy. This just makes that really clear. So makes us happy. Here it tells you who pays for the preparing of the HOA docs, which is the seller. And then I think everyone, meaning everyone like escrow, me, lenders, here it tells you that HOA certification fee is a charge to the buyer. And what that is that HOA demand that lenders require on properties that have homeowners associations. So that is literally for the benefit of the buyer. So the buyer is paying for it. Now, obviously, if there is no HOAs, these don't apply, right? And then transfer fees, it gives a little blurb there. The transfer fees could be either buyer or seller, depending on move in, move out. If you're selling a condo downtown, you know, there's a move out fee that the buyer has to pay to reserve the elevator and all of that. That would be their fee. And then the same are moving in. Buyers move in, sellers move out. And then the sellers would have to pay that to move out, right? Or switch it that way. You can see what I'm saying. All right, home warranty. I love this. Yay, home warranty. All you need to know is what kind of plan you want, who's paying for it, and what the price is, right? So even if you don't know this home warranty plan, like you don't know the name of the plan, that's fine. Just come over here and make sure that cost not to exceed is filled out and issued by is filled out. So this would be like, say it's a single family home, you're going to say cost not to exceed $650, issued by Old Republic Home Warranty. What this means is the buyer gets to pick the coverage, right? So now the buyer side gets to pick the coverage. They get to order the coverage, which means your buyer side TC is going to be ordering that coverage. And when we go down and look at 10C, we're going to see any overage is paid for by the buyer. So hopefully we can stop that last minute $10 credit or $25 credit from the agent's commissions when the plans change. Because what happens is y'all get used to writing the same amount, and then a home warranty plan will change by $10 or $15. You wrote the same amount. You want that same coverage. It's $15 more, and it ends up falling on the agent to pay for it. Well, now it specifically states in the contract that anything over that amount in the contract is going to be paid for by the buyer. So no more confusion there. Yay. All right. And that's the grid. We're done with the grid, which is literally like most of the contract. Now, again, the grid, that's all of your negotiable terms. It's really where that high level overview, if any of you have been using the summary offers in zip forms, it's very familiar. It's just that kind of high level, quick glance, makes it really easy for buyers and sellers to know exactly where they stand. Now we're going into more of that clunky, lawyerly part of the RPA. But again, there's not a lot of new stuff. It's just been moved around. And it looks a lot better if you ask me. So one of the great things is in 4A, there are no more mobile home purchase agreements. There are no more probate purchase agreements. There are no more tenant occupied, like there's no more RPA, the income property or tenant occupied. They're all just addendums now. So we have like one residential 1 to 4. And then we just have addendums. All right. So I've been in real estate since 2005. I've never seen a tenants in common purchase agreement or a stock cooperative. Knock on wood. Now they said that. I don't want to see it. But those are gone as well. And they are now just addendums. So this is part of those new forms. So no more, if you have a mobile home, do you have to worry about having a separate sales agreement? Just use this, click here, whatever you got, it'll pull that form in. And now it's just an addendum. So we love it. All right, then you have your B, your other addenda, right? So this is if you have an addendum attached, which some people do if you're doing a backup offer, those people out in East County, some areas of Chula Vista, Escondido, if you have any septic or well, there, I'm going to say it right. You want to pull that in. Buyer intent to exchange, they've changed the name of that. If you have a short sale or court confirmation or a seller's intent to exchange, they also changed the name of that form. That's where you would put that. C, I'm super excited. I know lenders and escrow officers are going to be super excited. I don't know how excited you guys are about this, but all of these advisories now, it says that they are not intended to be incorporated into the agreement and for reference purposes only. And what this means for you is that no longer can people say it's not a fully executed purchase agreement because somebody didn't sign the statewide buyer and seller advisory, because somebody didn't sign, let me check this and put it in the Keller Williams affiliate. Let me check this and say we don't have the wildfire advisory. Those don't matter. I mean, they matter. You check them, they'll bring them in. But what it says is that they're not a part of the purchase agreement. So it doesn't matter if that wire fraud advisory is fully executed, as long as the RPA is fully executed and any counters you have are executed, that you have an agreement, right? So yeah. Close those loopholes, Car. I love it. All right. Anything else we need to talk about? Nope. All right. Now we're going to get into, you're going to remember at the beginning of section 3, it talked about the deposit in the grid. Now here is all of what that means. So if you needed a deep dive or need more information on the deposit, you would go to that section 5. I'm going to scroll back up and try not to make you sick. You're going to start up here. You see it said A5, purchase price, D1, 5A1, initial deposit, 5A2. Okay, so now we're going to go back. And now you'll see 5A, initial deposit, increased deposit, purchase price, right? Talks about it right there. So now we can go into here. Increased deposit to be delivered to escrow holder in the same manner as the initial deposit. So one of the things that they said about the initial deposit is that it can either be by wire or a method acceptable to escrow, right? So make sure it's acceptable by escrow. They usually won't take like pennies. They usually won't take dollar bills in cash, right? So it has to be in a manner acceptable. So whatever that manner is, that's the manner any increased deposit needs to be delivered. Releasing, one thing I would like to mention, and Carr always likes to mention, is that releasing the deposit in and of itself is not necessarily against the law, right? But releasing the deposit and saying it's non-refundable requires an attorney, right? So our contract is not written that way. We don't have passive removals. We don't pass money to sellers and make it non-refundable. If you're going to write that in your contract, I have seen them in counter offers and contracts. They're not binding unless they are drafted by an attorney. They're also not recommended. So just realize that it's they're taking a harder stance on that as we go through. All right, all cash offer is not contingent on the buyer getting a loan. We'll talk about that a little later. Just because an investor marks an all cash offer, it doesn't prohibit them from getting a loan. It just means that in the end, they need to either purchase it all cash or close with the loan. But the seller does, the seller doesn't need to be super cooperative. They can't stand in the way, but they don't have to be like super helpful. All right, loans, buyer's loan status. So I'm super excited about this. You should be excited about this. Everybody should. Buyer's loan status. It's basically saying that now the seller or the seller's agent can contact the lender and get updates. So no more telling your lender not to talk to the listing side, because it is now in the contract under C3 that they get to. I'm not going to hit every single paragraph, guys. I took a 4-hour class and an 8-hour class on this, so we can definitely do this more than once. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me, but a lot of this is the same, right? Limits on credits to buyers, just in case you guys weren't aware, this is still the same, but any credits to the buyer need to be disclosed to the lender. So the lender, you can't make deals outside. The lender is supposed to know about it. So just make sure if you have any kind of large credits, I know we're not seeing them as much now, but if you do, that the lender can absorb them, because any credits that are not lender allowable go back to the seller. All right, additional, let's go down here to buyer stated financing. This is where it says that the seller is relying on the buyer's representation of the type of financing specified, that the seller has agreed to a specific closing date, purchase price, and to sell to the buyer in reliance on that buyer's specified financing. So say again, you have an investor and they write an all cash offer and you get their proof of funds. It's just they have millions of dollars in the bank, but then they turn around and they want to get a loan, right? So the thing is that they can absolutely do that, right? They can turn around and get a loan, but what they can't do is make it that then they don't have a loan contingency, right? So it's not contingent on the loan. They don't get to change the purchase price. They don't get to change the closing date. They don't get to do any of that, right? The seller can really hold their feet to the fire in those items, but they can still get alternate financing, right? It's just not an excuse from purchasing the property or a reason to close late. So there's that. So be careful about that. Let's see, what else? See. 7, I want to make sure I hit everything. I have notes. 7B1. Oh yeah, this is great. I have a feeling we will see some revisions on this come June, but starting in December, if the seller leaves any property at the house, the buyer has to hold on to it for 3 days before it's considered abandoned. Car's going to have a letter in their library about this. So just know that this is here now. I think it's going to be, I don't think it's going to last long, because who wants to keep the seller's junk for 3 days, right? If a buyer buys a property, nobody wants to do that. It does have a thing in here that you can, receive reasonable costs from the seller, but, I'm not sure how that's going to work either. So just realize that that's now in the contract. Let's see, 7E. This is basically that even if the seller remains in possession, they are to provide keys, passwords, codes, means to operate all locks, mailbox, security systems, alarm, home automation systems, intranet and internet connected devices included in the purchase price, garage door openers, blah, 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 blah. It also goes on to explain if it's an HOA that the buyer may be required to pay a deposit to obtain those keys. So just realize that is in here. They need to leave everything. What they do not need to leave is any smartphones or tablets. Those are considered personal property. So if there is like some tablet or phone that your buyer wants to operate all those smart systems, better ask for that in the items included. Otherwise, all they have to do is give passwords. All right, page 6. Here we go. I think we're on page 6. All right, contingencies and removal of contingencies. So here we're going to talk about all the loan stuff, right? So that the buyer is talking. So I'm going to use all of my words one of these days. All right. So make sure in this day and age in California with fire insurance, make sure 9A2 to investigate the insurability of the property as soon as possible, right? So as soon as you go under contract, you should be having your buyer start looking for an insurance, right? So we have earthquake insurance here, we have fire insurance here. If it's in a flood zone, there can be flood insurance. So you don't want them to not be able to purchase based on insurance. Failure of the buyer to obtain insurance may justify cancellation based on the investigation, but not on the loan, right? So you want to make sure that the buyer does not qualify or the property does not qualify, right? So insurability goes into investigation, which is the property. The buyer is the loan contingency. So it's kind of like when you think of physical investigation, that is everything outside what they're purchasing, right? The neighborhood, the streets, the freeways, the schools, the whatever. And the physical inspection is the house, right? Or the condo. So investigation is outside the house, inspection is inside the house. For buyers, is the buyer not qualifying for the loan or is the property not qualifying for the loan? That's two separate things. So insurance is a big thing. So just realize that that's in your investigation contingencies and not in your loan. All right, what else we got? Appraisal. This talks about if there's no appraisal contingency. So again, this is just the grid. We've already talked about the date. So you see no dates, right? In the old contract, you would see dates here. Those are all gone because we've already taken care of those in the grid. We already talked about investigation there for a minute, review of seller documents. Here we go. We've got title. So this is just the title section, right? So make sure you get title. Buyer has 5 days after receipt to review any revised preliminary title report. Leased and liened items. Here's the paragraph about solar, about propane, security, those items. So it's not only the ability of the buyer to take over the lease, but their willingness to take over a lease or liened item. So any assumption of the lease, let's see, blah, blah, blah. Buyer's review and the ability and willingness to assume any lease maintenance agreement or ongoing financial obligation, or to accept the property subject to any lien disclosed pursuant to paragraph 9B6, blah, 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 blah. Any assumption. So they need to either perform, right? They may cancel this agreement with the buyer at any time, refuses to enter into any necessary written agreements to accept responsibilities. So it's not only their abilities, we always talk about like the buyer has to apply for the solar lease. They also need to be willing to assume it. So that is one of their contingencies. Removal or waiver of contingencies with offers. So here's a big one that again, Carr went kind of on and on about. Buyer shall have no obligation to remove a contractual contingency unless the seller has provided all required documents, reports, disclosures, and information pertaining to that contingency. So don't have your buyers remove these investigation contingencies or inspection contingencies without getting all the required documents, reports, and disclosures from the seller. If your buyer does remove without first receiving all that information from the seller, the buyer is relinquishing any contractual rights that apply to that contingency. If buyer removes or waives any contingencies without an adequate understanding of the property's condition, buyer is acting against the advice of the broker. So basically what they're saying here is that if you remove the contingency with the offer, like remove all of buyer's inspection, investigation, titles, reports, disclosures, so sad, too bad. When they get that TDS and see that something's really wrong or maybe somebody died on the property and that's against their religion, they can't cancel because of it, because they removed that without adequately reviewing the disclosures. It doesn't trigger their 5-day right to cancel, although everybody likes to think so. So just be careful when you're doing that. Any questions? Anybody? I feel so alone. Feel free to unmute yourselves.
Doing a great job.
Oh, thank you. I can talk to myself all day. That's the problem. So just realize, you guys, in Southern California, it is not very common for sellers to fill out disclosures and sign them and provide them to the buyer prior to the offer, right? In Northern California, that is the norm. The norm is the disclosures are all done, the NHD reports are ordered, the preliminary title reports, they have escrows pre-opened, titles pre-opened, all of that information is there. They stick it all in the MLS in a link, and the buyers have the ability to review all of that information up front before ever going into escrow. And so they can remove all those contingencies up front because they got all the information. The danger lies when you remove those contingencies and you have none of that information up front. And you may or may not know what's important to your buyer. So just be leery of doing that. I know it's a tough market. I know it. I know it is. But just make sure you have an understanding of how that works. Items included and excluded, right? So here again, you want to talk about it. Here is where it breaks down to like, what are window coverings, window, door screens, awning, shutters, window coverings, which includes blinds, curtains, drapery, shutters, or any materials that cover any portion of the window, right? Those have to stay, right? All existing fixtures and fittings. And this kind of breaks down exactly what has to stay. And then also anything that's excluded that it should be in paragraph 3P, which is in the grid. Here it goes on to talk about those automated home systems. So, and non-dedicated devices. Buyer acknowledges that a separate device and access to Wi-Fi or internet may be required to operate some smart home features, and buyer may have to obtain such device after close of escrow. This is again where, say, your seller has a dedicated, has an iPad that they purchased, and that's just their home automation iPad and sits in a little holder over here. They're not necessarily have to give that up because the buyer can purchase their own iPad and set up it with the same username, password, and set up their home automation. So just that has been a point of contention with buyers. So just make sure that you have those conversations with your clients on that. Leased or liened items, we already talked about that. Allocation of costs for inspections. This, it goes into a little bit more of the point of sale requirements. If a buyer agrees to pay for repairs to be paid through escrow, that's that 10B. 10B2A. 10B2A, point of sale requirements. Here's that 10B3. We talked a little bit earlier about this, the reinspection fees. So if any repair is not completed in paragraph 10B1 in the time specified, and the lender requires an additional inspection to be made, sellers shall be responsible for any corresponding reinspection fees. So basically, if you don't have those smoke detectors, water heaters strapped, carbon monoxide detectors within that 7 days, causes a reinspection of the appraisal, which is usually about $150, the seller can be liable. So make sure that those things are up. Here it goes in the home warranty. Just the buyer is going to choose the coverage regardless of any optional coverages of the home warranty, and the buyer shall pay any cost of that plan chosen by buyer that exceeds the amount allocated to the seller, right? So that's basically buyer's going to pay anything up and above and beyond that. All right, statutory and other disclosures, including lead-based paint and cancellation rights. So here is all of the things that the seller has to do, right? So you have your TDS, your NHD, and your other statutory and supplemental disclosures. If the seller is required to provide a TDS, they are also required to provide an SPQ, and they are also required to provide an FHDS. Those are all tied to the same. Those are all tied to the same law, the same disclosure law on the TDS. And it's the civil code right here. 11026, 11019, right, by the civil code. So it's all the same code. And this is basically telling you what you need. Listing agents and buyer's agents. You're going to notice down here in paragraph 2, it talks about the agent's visual inspection disclosure, and that the copy of the TDS shall be signed by everybody and the agent section completed. If you complete the agent section as a listing agent to say, to say AVID attached. Make sure the AVID is attached because the TDS is not considered complete until the AVID is attached. It's opening, it's just a little loophole. So it's going to open that up, even though maybe your AVID doesn't really say anything. It can open it up for that buyer to have that 5 additional days to review and possibly cancel the agreement, even if they've already removed that contingency because they didn't have that information. So just make sure that you're doing your AVIDs. I know y'all hate them, but they're required. They're required by statute and they're required by your broker. So just do them. It's really easy. I'll send you a glide link. You can do it on your phone while you're there and even take pictures. It's really, really cool. Let's see. I'm trying to see. I have things in here that I'm excited about that you guys don't really care about. So I'm just making sure I don't hit those. Let's go over here. Your lead-based paint disclosure. They're changing the name to lead paint disclosure. So exciting stuff. What else you guys got? Let's see. 11G mutual, 11H. Oh, I'm excited about the new FERPDA that says that it's needs to be provided before close of escrow and not within 7 days. That's exciting. You guys probably don't think that's exciting. Condo, seller needs to disclose if it's in a condo. It's pretty self-explanatory, but sometimes with those PUDs, you never know. So just make sure the seller is disclosing if it's in a condo. Natural environmental hazards. The seller should be providing you with an NHD, known material facts, and also any insurance claims within the last 5 years. Those are items the seller needs to disclose to the buyer. Buyer's investigation of matters affecting the property. So the buyer shall, within the time specified in paragraph 3L3. So again, it's just back to referencing the grid on the timeline. The buyer has the right at buyer's expense to conduct investigations, inspections, tests, surveys, and other studies. So now it goes down to tell you, you can have inspections such as a home inspection, lead-based paint, an inspection for termites, right? You can have any of these. There's more on the BIA, a review of reports and disclosures prepared by or for seller and delivered to buyer, right? So anything the seller's done, if they have a termite report, they need to give it to you within the time specified. So basically the big thing on here is you can't make any invasive or destructive buyer investigations, which you should all know that. Any buyer reports need to be delivered to the seller at no cost. This is that 3 days after receipt of any report is given to the seller at no cost. Complete copies of all reports obtained by the buyer. This is the other thing. This is the only thing that survives the termination of this agreement. So if you get a home inspection and you get a termite inspection within 5 days of opening escrow, say, and your buyer got, while they were there with the inspector, they decide, nope, this place isn't for me, I'm canceling. You still need to provide a copy of those reports to the listing side. I don't care if the listing side says they don't want them. Your contract states that you have to give them. So just give them for free. Doesn't cost them anything. All right. This doesn't have a lot to do with anybody, but it makes me excited because it tells the seller within 7 days they have to give escrow any necessary information to clear title, which is exciting for me. All right, we're almost done, you guys. I promise. We're close. I'm gonna kind of. All right, this is your buyer's cancellation rights and your seller's rights to cancel, right? So it talks about when the seller can cancel and when the buyer can cancel. Sellers don't have a lot of cancellation rights. So sellers know that they want to sell the home when they want to sell the home. So they sell the home. The only reason they get cancellation rights is when the buyer does not perform. So make sure your buyers perform. That's basically what this says. We can get into this more. I really need to show you the end of the contract though, because like I said, this is really long. So you guys have access. I gave you this. It is a highlighted copy. You can kind of see some of this stuff that's highlighted, talks a little bit about some things that have changed. MLS service, you can't remove pictures. So tell your buyers the pictures, if it's on the internet, stays on the internet, right? Sorry. All right. Acceptance. We're getting away from any confirmations of acceptance. So now acceptance is when it is delivered, right? When the recipient, when the party has delivered it. So as a buyer's agent, when you deliver this, you're gonna, when the listing agent delivers it back to you, that's your acceptance, or maybe it's the counter offer. So it's delivery. It's no longer receipt. It's all delivery. Counting days are the same. Day 0 is first day of acceptance. There's a little bit in here about delivery, delivered, and deliver. And this we're going to cover in the next thing, because I want to show you where you're going to see for electronic signatures or for email addresses where that delivery takes place. Because now you get to specify where you want your documents delivered. So as soon as you email it and you have the email, that's considered delivered, right? So it's a little different. This is kind of the big thing. I told you the end is like crazy. I'm just gonna scroll through. I gotta be respectful of your guys' time. We're gonna do this again, and I'm always available for questions. Expiration of offer, seller has no obligation to respond. You can check here if there's entity buyers. They now can put their whole law trust here and then just sign, and then print the name of the signer right there if they're an entity. Same with the seller, right? So the seller entity, they can put it right here, big long name of the trust. The signers are here, then sign and date. All right, broker's real estate section. This is what I want to talk to you guys about really quick before we go. This contract takes into account the fact that we are in the we're going into 2022, and most everything now is done by email. When I first started, it was couriers and faxes and triplicate forms, right? Now it's email, it's electronic, there's no paper involved. So cars realize that you can now do links, and you now have this designated electronic delivery address. So you guys, make sure your zip forms or Glide, whatever you're using to generate your forms, has the email you want, because whatever you put in here, that is the email address. Whatever you put in there for texting, once it sends from, like, say I'm going to send this to you, the minute I put that delivered email address and I hit send, it is now delivered. You don't get to say you were in Cabo for 3 days and didn't check your email, so it doesn't count. That's no longer in existence. Now you have to check that email, and it doesn't matter whether or not you got it and opened it, which used to be the old trick, right? Like, wait for all the offers to come in and be like, oh, I'm not going to check my email for 3 days because I haven't, confirmed receipt of it. So it doesn't count. Well, that's no more confirmations. You don't see any confirmation on here. It is literally designated electronic delivery addresses now. So what doesn't go in here? My email address, nowhere on this contract. No. I don't work nights and weekends, so don't do that. But make sure, like, if you're on a team, that it's whatever team address that you want. So say you're on your listing, you have like send all offers to offers at canerealestate.com, but then as you get into the contract, you want all the contract stuff to be somewhere else. Make sure that somewhere else email is in your designated electronic delivery email address. You can also give an alternate, but you want to make sure that email address matches the email address that you have. If you've been in real estate for a while, when you signed up for your car account, you may have some random Gmail address in your zip forms. Make sure that your account information is up to date, because I'm pretty sure this is just going to pull in automatically, and you don't want to get messed up for some email you never check, right? And conversely, Amy, cover your ears. If you don't use your Keller Williams email address, but you use a different email address, and that's the one that you check regularly, make sure that's the email that's in there, right? So it's all about delivery now. It is not receipt or acceptance. I know, sorry. Everybody wants to use their KW address, right? Everybody wants to. So I know I kind of skipped down at the end a little bit pretty fast. I know that I want to be respectful of your time. I have time. I don't know if Amy does. I have time. I'm happy to stay on if you guys have any questions. If you want to unmute yourselves. We can, feel free if there's something you didn't know, ask. I know I kind of skipped that bottom of the thing, but again, like if you want to know, when you look at the grid, if you're like, I want more information about that, it tells you what paragraph to look at. Go look at that paragraph, right? And it will give you the deeper dive car, legal speak, all that big, chunky, heavy stuff. And then also feel free to reach out to me. I didn't even say who I was, but you guys should know who I am. My name is Dawn, and you can reach me. Sorry, I cracked myself up. Seriously, any questions? Unmute yourselves.
I think everybody's quiet.
I know, it's a lot, isn't it?
It is, but you know what? It's all good information, and thank you for taking some time to explain it all to us.
Absolutely. So you guys, we've been told now it's changing. Like they've even changed it. When I took my certification course, I took the first one offered. It's changed a little bit how they're teaching it to the second certification course. I'm going to keep taking courses to make sure I'm giving you the most up-to-date information from car legal. But right now what they're telling us is this is going to be released in November side by side with the 2018 RPA. So I'm not sure how that's going to, I don't believe them. I'm just going to say that. I don't believe them because there's 79 revised forms and all those revisions have to be in there too, right? Because your contingency removal is not going to match the paragraph sections in the RPA. But whatever, I digress. They say that's what's going to happen. May or may not happen. You might be able to access it in November. As soon as I know, I'll let you guys know. And then for sure, they're telling us that it will be available. It will drop December 20th. It may happen a little sooner. And then I believe starting January 1, anything opening past January 1 in 2022 has to be on this new contract. So, and don't forget to grab that Google link. It has this highlighted version of the RPA, so you guys can have it and keep it. This version shouldn't change. There may be a few spelling errors that they might fix, but other than that, this is the RPA being released in December. Biggest overhaul since in 15 years, because all they've done is like bolt on. This, they scrapped it, revised it, put it together, all brand new. It's beautiful. I think you guys are going to love it. I know change is hard, but it's super, super nice that in 3 paragraphs, you're done, right? 3 pages, you're done. Just that delivery. I don't want people to get tripped up on that delivery address. So just make sure your email's up to date.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dawn. And thanks for always keeping us up to date about everything that's going on.
Absolutely.
I will make sure that this recording is posted soon. Perfect.
And then Amy, if you can just shoot me over everyone who attended, I'll make sure you guys have, I'll put you on my email list so you get all the updates as we go along.
Will do. Thanks, Dawn.
Awesome. Thank you guys.
Bye.